I'm so happy here to be with Diana Haskell today at Toot Your Own Horn. We are here to talk about Diana's trajectory playing the clarinet. Oh my gosh, what a story she has.
It's good to be here. I thank you for asking me to do this. It is sort of a passion of mine to share the joy and love of playing with not just, the players that are going to be great players or are, already successful professional players, but the beginner, the adult amateur. I've started people in their 60s on the clarinet, and I think it's really important to understand the many paths that we have to throughout our lives. I think there's a tendency for, I know I have students who think, oh my gosh, she must have had all this perfect stuff in her
Right.
life where she is. And I think, well, no. So it is really good that you're doing this series to show many different ways I don't like to use the word arrive because I don't feel like we ever really arrive, but just, in this process. So I thought I would talk a little bit about my family first, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So I grew up in a family where music was a part of our daily life, and my neither of my parents were professional musicians. My mom had exactly 2 years of piano lessons, but really sounded great. My dad, I don't think had any, but he could read music and he could harmonize, and he sang in the church choir. My grandmother was a pianist for a silent movie theater in St. Louis. And she had perfect pitch. I do not. Nobody else in our family does, but she had perfect pitch. And I used to play this game, where she would play a note. I would play a note on my clarinet or my piano, and she would be able to identify it. And I thought that was just normal. She was a great pianist. Then she met my grandpa, and then she stopped and had a family. So there's always music. There was always music in our family, but it was a small town. We didn't have orchestra programs and all of that. We had a band, and we had a fantastic grade school band director, Cloyd Myers, who was strict and probably today would have been considered too strict, but he had a great program. It started in fourth grade, which was, I know that's not the norm anymore, but that was a huge part of things. But my family, my dad would go to the record store back then about once a month and come home. He would buy records out of the dollar bin, classical music or jazz, or sometimes bluegrass or even country once in a while. And he would say, listen to this. I love this composer, Rachmaninoff. And it would be like some piece that nobody's ever heard of by Rachmaninoff. I think I learned The Bells by Rachmaninoff, which many people probably don't know. I've played it once in my career. I knew it by the time I was a freshman in high school. We listened to Louis Armstrong all the time. The very first clarinetist that I ever heard as a child was Pete Fountain, followed by Benny Goodman. And we listened to both of them all the time. So I had Pete Fountain's sound in my ear when I was going to start to play the clarinet.
Wow.
Yeah, my dad just believed in sharing music and let's make it fun and let's listen to this. And he knew nothing about music. He knew some about jazz, but really nothing about classical. But he just knew it was important to share and he loved it. And because of his love, because of a parent's love and openness to learning, that's how I got started. So, if there's a lesson here, it's that whoever a mentor is or a parent is in your life, if you have one person like that in your life, your band director, somebody that just helps you, start to listen, it can make the difference between, having lessons for a couple of months and quitting and deciding, oh, I'm really having fun. I don't care if people go into music, but just have fun with it. So when I was in third grade, I started piano with my neighborhood piano teacher. And I loved piano and I was pretty natural at it. My piano teacher's husband was the high school band director. They had three daughters. The high school band director played clarinet, and all three daughters played clarinet, including the one that I was in the same class with. So in fourth grade, when I had an aptitude test, they said, oh, you should play the French horn, flute, or clarinet. And I didn't know what a French horn was because it was band and we didn't have any of those. And I didn't want to play the flute. I wanted to do what this family did. And so we rented an instrument for a little while. My parents then bought me a nice wood Bundy clarinet. Back then, they weren't too bad. And I thought that was just the greatest thing. I started and I would practice for 15, 20 minutes without anybody asking me, which, for a fourth grader, that was pretty good. By fifth grade, I thought, I'd really like to be a band director. Now, this is based on a little town of 6,000 people, maybe. And knowing that we had a band program, I really didn't know anything about orchestras or anything like that. In seventh grade, I started taking lessons with the band director's oldest daughter. And in eighth grade, my dad and mom said, "We think you really like this." And they talked to the band director, and he said, she would benefit from a different horn if you can afford it. So they scraped up money, and my parents owned a store, so they were busy. They didn't have a lot of money. It was all tied up in the store. And as you know, people think, well, you're a store owner, so you're rich, but that's another story. But my parents bought me a buffet R13. There was one at the store. They went in and they purchased it and brought it home. And I still have this horn, Lisa. It is the most beautiful horn. It is the most gorgeous sound. It's a real early buffet. And once in a while I get it out and play it. And I think, oh yeah, that's my voice. That voice from that first horn still kind of sits with me, even though I've had many clarinets since then. So in seventh grade, I went to a Illinois Summer Youth Music camp at Illinois State University. And then my dad, again, not knowing anything, said in high school, "I've heard of this place called Interlochen. I've read about it. And, I wonder if you might like to go." And I was still taking piano lessons and then also clarinet. And I went there for 8 weeks. And I just thought I was in heaven. This was like a dream come true, to be out in the woods, making music and doing all this stuff with people who loved to do it. And there were dancers and all that. So unfortunately at that time, my piano teacher passed away. And then I went to the only other teacher in town, one of the only other teachers, who happened to be an Oberlin graduate on piano. And he took me from, Beethoven sonatinas and Bach two-part inventions to Beethoven sonatas and Liszt etudes. So that when I went to Interlochen the next summer, I was studying with Fernando Lers, who taught piano at Peabody. He said, "I want you to audition. I want you to come study with me on piano at Peabody." And I said, "Oh, really?" I thought I was going to be a clarinetist. And then I also, started thinking about this, and I kind of liked them both. I actually prefer piano, but it was getting to the point where I had to sort of make a decision. One, if I was going to go into music. Two, if I was going to do both, which I wasn't sure, or if I was going to pick one. Along with this new teacher in piano, my dad and mom decided that it was time for me to study with somebody, and our band director suggested Jim Barco. And I don't know if you knew Jim. He was actually a saxophone doubler who taught at Vandercook College. Great teacher, but nobody knows that. He has taught some other clarinetists that did really, really, really well. And we would drive in. My dad would get up 5 o'clock every Saturday morning, drive 2.5 hours, take me to Vandercook College on the south side, South Michigan. He would watch the car while I would go in and have about a 2-hour lesson. And then we would drive home, and my sweet dad would go to work. My mom had opened the store and was working there alone. He would join her, and they would go to work. And I didn't really appreciate this kind of sacrifice at that point. I knew it was big, and I loved spending the time with my dad, but I didn't really understand it till later, what my parents really, really did to allow that to happen. So I studied with him for 2 years, and then, applied Peabody, made it in, and I applied at Northwestern, and I made it in as a piano major, but not a clarinet major.
Seriously?
Did not make it in as
Oh,
clarinet.
I would never have guessed that. Really?
Isn't that hysterical?
That's
And then
hysterical.
again, my dad said he'd heard of this school called Eastman. We knew nothing, and he said, even my teacher, Jim Barco, really didn't know. And he said, "I've heard of this school, and I think it's supposed to be a pretty good school." So we applied, and my mom and I went out during a snowstorm, The plane almost crashed. We ended up going back to Detroit. My mom was crying, thinking we were missing the audition.
Oh,
Eastman,
no.
Eastman didn't believe her. They thought she was lying, so they called the airlines. And sure enough, there was our plane that experienced wind shear, and they had to drive back to Detroit. So they let me come later that day. I was the last person to audition for the season. And I played for about 5 to 6 minutes. And that was it. And we walked out in the hall. My mom just burst in tears. It's like, we just took this plane ride. It was the first plane ride either one of us had ever been on. And we almost died. And then we played for 5 minutes, right? And then Mr. Hasty later said, no, yours was the best audition of, of that year. He didn't tell me that till I was an adult. My mom was like, well, it would be nice if he would have said something a little sooner. but anyway, it all worked out. And then I ended up going to Eastman. And then I was a piano minor for a while, but it was too hard for me. I just wasn't that talented that I could practice clarinet and piano at the level I needed to make it work. But when I retired, my goal is to go back and pick up the piano and start playing again.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story.
Well, and also with teaching, I started teaching in 8th grade. I would, my band director would have me teach some of the other students, and I just loved teaching. And I loved helping them learn how to form an embouchure and do the fundamentals. And I just thought that was the greatest thing. And I've been teaching since 8th grade and have always had a studio and have taught different places. And I do, master classes and so forth. But my trajectory is a little bit different. I will take any student. I've had some of my colleagues say, why are you not concentrating on just the
Right.
top students? And I say, because it's not about my ego. It's about sharing with students and helping them reach their goals, whatever they are. I don't want students to go into music unless it's just absolutely the only thing that they really want to do.
Right.
And, there's a lot of ways to be a major in music. But I believe that if anyone wants to learn, and I think they should have that opportunity. So, I will try to help students at any level, beginners, intermediates, elderly, people with learning disabilities, amateurs. It doesn't matter to me. And
Cool.
actually, all of those things have made me a better teacher because you have to really figure out ways to help students. And, it's not always the most gifted natural person. And so that's just been sort of my thing. I love to teach.
That is so cool. Would you tell me, see, I thought you went to Eastman because you just had your pick of the litter, and for sure yeah, I don't know, Hasty was better than Marcellus, and I don't know, that is so funny. And to play piano so well, oh my gosh, that's such an accomplishment, really.
Well, if when I was a senior in college, I said, Mr. Hasey, what should I do? And he said, well, you should, go to a master's. He was pretty clear about, where he thought I should study. And one person was Joe Allard
Mhm.
at Juilliard. And so, I was lucky enough to win to go there. And then I I got kind of jaded. And so I quit. And I worked at Playland Amusement Park, which is the amusement park north of New York City,
Quit?
where I quit. So I said, I quit the clarinet, and in a big dramatic, I'm just done. And I went to work at Playland, where a friend of mine from Eastman was working. Playland is where they filmed the movie Big. It's
Oh,
the And at that point, Marriott had purchased it and was going to turn it into a big, huge amusement park like a Disney kind of thing. And it's a really cool place, right? It's on Long Island Sound, and it's right on the water, and it's very Art Deco. And I was part of the show operations team, and I had to zip up people in Bugs Bunny costumes and confiscate drugs and all these different things. And I was like so determined, I just was not going to be a musician. And about 2 months into that, I get a phone call in the office, and my friend Roger said, it's Mr. Hasty on the phone. And I said, Mr. Hasty? And he got on the phone. He said, what are you doing? And I said, Mr. Hasty, I quit. So I'm working at Playland Amusement Park. Well, I don't care that you quit. You need to play the clarinet. I said, well, no, I'm done. I'm just so tired of the whole thing. It's too political. I can't deal with it. And he said, I don't care. There's an audition for the Savannah Symphony in a week. The auditions are in New York City. You need to go take that. And he hung up the phone. Click. And I mean, I hadn't played for 2 months. So I turned to my friend Roger and I said, it was Mr. Hasty. He tells me I should go take this audition. And he said, well, you better do it because he told you to. So I pulled out my clarinets. The people that that were working under me, they didn't know I was even a musician. They didn't know I had a master's degree from Juilliard and a bachelor from Eastman. So they were surprised to hear me play because I played, on the off hours. And then I took a state vehicle down to New York City. I don't remember which hotel it was at. And I played for Christian Badia and in a room for about half an hour and got that job. And so that was how my inauspicious start. And that's another thing I like to tell people, there's this with social media, there's this kind of promotion of really young players just getting out of school and they win a huge job and everybody else feels like scum if you don't get that job, right? And I think that is just a terrible thing for people. First of all, I mean, I worked in a different industry and I've worked in several different industries, not just music and not just Playland, but I've done different things. In Savannah, I was also, I lied and told them that I had a lot of experience teaching music appreciation at Savannah College of Art and Design, which was a lie. I had never done anything like that. So I got that job and went and bought some books and stayed 1 week ahead of the art students and taught a class on music appreciation. And all of these things made me a better musician, a better person, but it certainly was not that glamorous path that a lot of musicians sort of feel a lot of times like they have to, follow. And I mean, you hear about them. Congratulations to, Diana Haskell just won first clarinet in the Berlin Philharmonic and the New York Philharmonic and the Chicago Symphony. And she has to make a decision between all three. And everybody else is like, oh man, and I like to tell my story also because I have done just fine. I've done just fine that I was not I didn't make it into Northwestern. I've done just fine that I didn't get the huge job right out of school. I've done fine that I worked at Playland and done all these things. And I'm grateful for those opportunities and grateful for that kind of a path like this, which I think is way more normal than just that shoot to the top. Otherwise, you're just a big loser, So, we just don't know. We've all been given this gift. Use that gift, grow the gift, use it, see where the gift takes you, right? It is very easy in orchestra life. It is very easy because, there's a lot of, you have to critique yourself. Mm-hmm. The standards are really high. You might have people around you that are really supportive, and I've been lucky in my career to have that, but I've been close enough to sections where that isn't the case, and it can really mess with your head, and so you have to really work at that. You have to really cultivate gratefulness, and I admit that I've been grumpy sometimes because the perfectionistic nature or just feeling like I'm not measuring up to my own standards or to the standards of whatever is around me. But in the end, you have to cultivate that gratefulness and stay grateful as much as you can for whatever you've been given. And also just, again, keeping the joy and remembering that it's a gift.
Mm-hmm. If somebody was listening to this podcast and was really intrigued by your story and about what it means to play a woodwind instrument, what advice would you give them about starting to play?
Well, I would say just do it. Just don't be intimidated. Don't worry about being perfect. Just pick up the clarinet or flute or whatever woodwind instrument and just start to play and find a tribe. Now I was lucky in my family that, there was music in our house. I've had students where parents work at night and the student is not allowed to practice in their house. Right. So, and they're not allowed to have music. So we work on things like, let's put pillows in your closet. Can you play softly in your closet in pillows? Let's talk to your band director. So you have to find the tribes to make it possible for you to play. And part of that tribe is find people of your kind of the same level that you are and play with them in your band, play some duets, talk to your band director, or ask your private teacher to talk to your band director. Or if you're a private teacher, talk to that student's band director and say, this person really is enjoying it, but they need a little bit of a tribe,
Mhm.
right? So that's one thing that I would recommend. And another is to find a role model. And obviously, not everybody can afford a private teacher. And I've done a lot of free teaching, and I think a lot of teachers do a lot of free teaching. So you can usually find a role model if you talk to your band director. If you're an adult, if you can afford to take lessons, that's great. Get yourself in a community band. Just find a way to be in a group and then kind of look for those role models. Obviously, it's easy to find role models on YouTube. You can listen to Pete Fountain as much as you want. He can be a great role model, but to actually have interaction with somebody, I think is really helpful. And then listen to all kinds of music. And again, this is easy and it's free now. You can just go to YouTube, you know, put in clarinet concertos and just start listening to one. And you may go, ew, after 8 bars. Or you might go, that's pretty cool. Who's this by? All right, what else has this composer done? And start listening to people. At first, you won't know what you're listening to, but you'll get better at it. And so those are really important things, being in a group. From a technical standpoint, I think if you can afford a clarinet, that's helpful. There's a lot of good used clarinets out there, and you're the queen of helping people choose instruments, and you've done it for me. You've done it for my students. You have used clarinets. A lot of local shops have clarinets. We've got a great place here in St. Louis.
You
Um,
do. Mhm.
yeah, with Clarinet Quest and Audrey. And there's a lot of places that you can look for and purchase used horns. And your band director can be a great resource as well. Renting can be fine, but eventually getting a decent clarinet that works well, or a bad clarinet that actually is in good working order, get a good mouthpiece and some reeds, and that can really help you. And honestly, there are some students that can't afford that. So if that's you, call me. I'll help you. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but having a decent instrument, learning how to read music, those are some real basic fundamentals. Icing on the cake, if you can take some private lessons, that's also really helpful too. You know, that goes for somebody who starts an instrument when they're in their 50s or 60s, as well as the adult amateur, or just a beginner clarinetist in 4th grade or 6th grade.
So before we say goodbye, tell us how many other jobs you had after that first one that you serendipitously got thanks to Mr. Hasty's phone call.
You mean orchestra jobs?
Yeah.
Well, I was principal clarinet in Savannah Symphony, and concurrently, I was acting principal in Charleston Symphony for one season. I was supposed to go to play principal clarinet in the Columbus Symphony. Christian Badi had asked me to come and play there for a year, but I took an audition for the Buffalo Philharmonic and won that. I went there because that was a tenure track job. And actually, after and it was Semyon Bishkov who hired me there, and we had this great tour, and it was it was a really wonderful time. Buffalo played such a great orchestra, and in the middle of that, though, they were having financial difficulties. And one night, we opened the newspaper and we found out that the entire orchestra had been fired in order for them to close the doors. So that was a shock. I was young, and I was also on the committee, the orchestra committee. And I was like, I didn't have any idea what was going on. And we had all sorts of meetings with the county executor, like in the alley downtown one time. It was crazy. In the middle of that, an audition for Milwaukee came up for assistant E flat, which I had never played, and second. So I bought an E flat, and I don't know, had about 4 weeks to learn it, and went to Milwaukee. And I don't know how I won that job, but I did. And I remember McCall's, and then McCall coming up to me afterwards and saying, you sounded really good, but you don't sound like you've played E flat very much. And Russ Dagan was standing there and he knew that I had just gotten this clarinet. And he was like, yeah, is the, price tag still on that thing? Kind of laughing. And so McCall said, have you played E flat much? And I said, well, no, not in public. uh, and then I won the job in St. Louis as assistant, and then it was switched to associate in E flat, and that's what I've done since. So I've been really blessed. Work with some really great clarinetists and great musicians in every orchestra, great conductors. So I'm just yeah, really
And
had a
you're a
dream.
role model for women in orchestras and for women in teaching and for women who have the right kind of spirit for music and for just everyone to know music better.
I didn't know that. I mean, when you're in our generation, there were very few of us. When I won the job in Buffalo in a major orchestra, there were three women as principal clarinetists. It's not very much better now. There are more women musicians, but not principal players. And there's still a glass ceiling, at the conservatory level, right, for women. I didn't think of myself ever as a role model. I just thought of myself as trying to hang on every day to do a good enough job so I wouldn't get fired. Honestly, that was, we weren't taught. We had no mentors really, and we just didn't know. So I was just going through life thinking, okay, okay. And I wish that I had better and well, any mentoring from women because I think that's something that's still really necessary. And there are still issues with equality in our industry. So if I can be a mentor now, I'm happy to do it. I think I understand that now. But honestly, my whole career, I did never thought of myself as mentor worthy. you know
Far from it. Diana, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for all you do.